Well, I'd like to welcome everyone back to Ginger GM and the videos. I haven't done any videos for a while. Sorry about the delay there. I've just been very busy with other stuff going on. Books, DVDs, etc. I thought about time I did a video, so this is what we're going to look at now. I've just returned from the Sunningdale Open. You can probably see the post below about my game against Gawain. I had quite a lot of interesting games there. We're going to look at a game I had in the King's Gambit. I've started to dabble with this for white. Quite like the idea of playing the King's Gambit. It's quite a romantic, fun opening to play. You often get some very exciting positions, so definitely going to give it a go in the future as well. In this game I was playing an Italian FM, Maurizio, I believe his name is, Genovese, possibly is how I pronounce it. Again, my pronunciation is bad, so I apologise for that. But yeah, it was a very interesting game, so let's move straight on to it. Well, actually, I mean, one thing I should mention about these E2, E4 tournaments are that they're very, very good. I'd recommend them to anyone out there who's interested in playing over the weekend. They're always at a really nice hotel. They're always run very professionally, and Sean Hewitt's doing a great job of organising them. So very recommended, very highly. So trying to get down there if you haven't played them in the past. So I was white, started E4, E5, F4, so as we know the King's Gambit, D5, and so this is a counter gambit that black often plays. It's very popular. The idea is that black doesn't want to take the pawn on F4, he wants to have some fun as well by getting activity quite quickly. I mean, obviously D5 opens up the bishop on C8, so maybe that can zoom into the game and things like that. So the best move here is capturing on D5. Now my opponent took on F4, and he's maybe going to continue with Queen to H4 check if I'm not careful. So Knight to F3 is the main move that's played. My opponent now played a Bishop to D6. Now this is not quite as common as some of the other lines I think I'm right in saying. I think Queen takes D5 is one of the most, you'll see this more often than most other moves. I believe that Mickey Adams used this to beat the famous King's Gambit player Bob Eames at the British Championships, or it was a very similar position anyway. But Bishop to D6, luckily I actually had a look at this opening with Bob Eames when he came down to my place in Godalming, and we had a look at this one line, so I mean I just about remember what white should play in this variation. So cheers, Bob. Anyway, Bishop C4 is the best move. Check on B5 actually helps black's development. So this is, I mean, for example, if I go Bishop B5 check, black can just go C6, and his development's actually being accelerated because I'm going to have to move my bishop on B5 again because it's attacked. So anyway, Bishop to C4. Knight to E7 was played. If Knight to F6, I think Queen to E2 is right, and the ending is actually quite good for white because he's got a stronger centre. So Knight to E7 was played. Castles, D4, C6, and now I took on C6. I couldn't remember if I was going to play Knight C3 first. Probably am actually, but I took on C6. Knight takes, Knight C3, Bishop G4. So black's putting his pieces on the most active squares. Knight to E4. Black should keep his dark square bishop, bishop to C7, C3, Knight to G6. And this is, I remember this position is one position me and Bob spent a fair bit of time on. And I think John Nunn used to play this as black, and I remember Mark Hedman's had this from the white side, so I was quite happy to get this at the time. I believe that Mark's played Knight to F2 in the past, which maybe is the safest way to play, with some idea that the knight might come round to D3 later on, putting pressure on F4 and maybe jumping into something like E5 or even C5. So this is the general idea, but an idea me and Bob looked at was H3, when we spent a bit of time studying Bishop to F5, which I think is considered the main line, and then Knight FG5, so typical King's Gambit kind of play, just going straight for the king. The knight really sort of homes in on the H7 square and the F7 square. Kind of like beginner's chess, but all the white's pieces are attacking, when one interesting line I remembered was H6, Queen to H5. So you don't care about this knight on G5, you're just going for attack. And now black can try counter a sacrifice. Knight takes D4. Very exciting stuff, when the best line here is Knight takes F7. So very exciting. Everything is a bit crazy here, so don't worry if you can't calculate it. I'll just show you one line. Let's say rook takes, and then white takes the rook, king takes, and our brilliant move here that white's got to give him the advantage. He's got the move knight to g3, which is a lovely move. And after this, white's actually doing very well here. I won't go into it much more because it's just still madness. But if you want to study this yourself, you can obviously have a look at it. But yeah, white's doing well in this crazy line. So if we go back to position after knight g6, h3, I was obviously hoping for this bishop to f5. But now my opponent played bishop to h5, which is one of the only moves we didn't look at. And this just seems like a very interesting and good move to me. I mean, black's obviously keeping the pin on the knight on f3, and he wants to go knight to h5 next. So a very good plan. Well, I continue queen to d3, getting my queen out the pin, and my opponent now played knight to h4, which is again very interesting. I was a bit more concerned about knight to a5 actually, trying to get rid of my strong bishop when I was going to play bishop to b5, but then maybe black can play knight to h5, and he's put my bishop on a worse square here. It's not as well placed on b5, so this was maybe a bit more worrying. But knight to h4 was also interesting. And when I continued with the plan I had in mind, knight on f to g5. So my general idea here is to go knight to f6 check, followed by queen to h7 checkmate. So if I can just get my knight on e4 out of the way, it's going to be checkmate. So my opponent's really only got one idea here, bishop to g6. And okay, I took on f4, so I won a pawn, but I do have some slight problems with all my pieces here. They're actually a little bit hanging in some variations, and they look very active, but I wasn't convinced that this was totally clear, this line. I mean, my opponent played h6 here. I continued with a very interesting idea, which we'll come to in a minute. The computer actually suggests I should probably just play bishop takes c7 here, queen takes. And now knight to f3 is one line I had a look at in the game, but I wasn't particularly happy with this move because I was in a lot of pins after this. But maybe the computer actually recommends the move bishop to f7 check. The idea, if black plays bishop to f7, well, then this knight to f6 check idea again, and we have the beautiful idea queen to h7 checkmate. So that's a very pretty variation. I admit I didn't see. But black can survive a rook takes f7, and then after something like knight takes, bishop takes, rook to ae1. White's got a rook and two pawns to the two minor pieces, but generally these two minor pieces are quite tricky to play against. So this position is still actually very unclear, quite a murky position, but I expect this is white's best opportunity. Anyway, after h6, I wanted to sacrifice a piece, so I went queen to g3. This just looked like a lot of fun to me at the time. Queen to g3, much more interesting possibility. And well, I mean, this is black's got a lot of chances to go wrong here. In the game, he played the best move, knight to f5. Let's just have a quick look at some of the other variations as well. Oh, I'll jump forward a bit there. I'll jump backwards even. After queen to g3, what else can he play? Well, let's say he can't take a g5, so just take on c7, which is just generally quite good for white. He can't. Well, he can take on f4, but then my plan is to go rook takes f4. If he takes on g5 here, I was going to go rook takes h4, which looked like a lot of fun. For example, if black takes on h4, I go queen takes g6, which is probably just very good for white. With, you know, for example, something like knight takes d4, knight to g5, and mate's probably not too far away. So after queen to g3, knight to f5 was the best move. So my opponent's so far playing well. My queen has to stay active, queen to g4, and now bishop to takes f4. So this is an interesting position here. Now, one example, I mean, I was thinking if he goes h takes g5, I was just going to go bishop takes g5. And even though I'm a piece for two pawns down here, I thought that black's king is in a lot of problems here. I mean, for example, queen d7. I've always got a lot of counterplay here. All my remaining pieces are actually attacking. I mean, if you look at every single one of my pieces, they're all, well, okay, maybe not the rook on a1, but they're all doing a good attacking job. And actually, I've got quite an interesting move here. I can actually just play the quiet move bishop to h4, which prepares, well, it controls the g3 square, and it prepares tricks like queen takes g6. Maybe I've got some knight to f6 checks. It's an interesting position, but I think that white's got enough counterplay here for a sacrifice piece. So I was reasonably happy about this. But after queen to g4, my opponent got rid of this strong bishop on f4, bishop takes f4. And here, maybe I should just continue calmly, rook takes f4. When after, I mean, I was a bit worried about h takes g5, rook takes f5, bishop takes f5, queen takes f5, and now black's got a strong counter-attacking move, knight takes d4, which is as well, it's a pity for me he's got this move when I actually think maybe black's better here. So I didn't want to do this. It's probably gone wrong for me somewhere. Maybe this whole sacrifice was a bit over the top. But after bishop to f4, I played a very interesting move, but it does have a big downside to it, which I was lucky my opponent didn't exploit. So I went knight to e6. So another sacrifice. The idea of this was just to get hold of the light square bishop, but my opponent missed a very strong move. I mean, he went f takes g6, f takes e6, I went queen takes g6, and all of a sudden here I realised that my opponent could play the devastating move, knight takes d4, and we didn't play this move, luckily for me. I think I assumed that I could just go rook to d1 here. But I suddenly missed it. He's got this e5 square. This was the big problem, which I didn't see. Knight to e5 is always going to win a lot of material. So after knight takes d4, I'm probably actually just busted here. So I was lucky my opponent didn't play this. I mean, it was just this e5 square. I missed he could do this, which is joint blindness from both of us. I mean, after his queen g6, luckily my opponent retreated with knight to e7. And actually here, I think white's got more than enough compensation for the sacrifice piece. For example, I went queen to g4, and now my opponent played another move. He just played knight takes d4, which we'll come back to in a minute. But I mean, just a demonstration of the counterplay that white's got here. I mean, if you look at all my pieces, they're all doing a good job, and my light square bishop is so strong. I think white's got decent, very good compensation for the piece. For example, if my opponent tries to hang on to his bishop to e3 check, I go king to h1, the same as his king, and we can just see the play that I'm going to get. Something like rook takes f8, queen takes rook to f1, queen to e8, bishop takes e6, and all of a sudden he's got lots of things to worry about. My rook's going to f7, my knight's going to d6, and it's very hard for black to coordinate his pieces here. All of black's pieces are very badly positioned, so I think I'm doing very well here, but of course I'm lucky my opponent didn't play his knight takes d4 move. But anyway, after queen g4, now my opponent played knight takes d4, but this is just bad for black. I played rook takes f4, my opponent blood now queen to b6, and the rest is pretty simple. I can just take on d4, takes, king to h1, he took on f4, and maybe only now he realised that he can't play queen takes c4 because he drops his queen to knight to f6 check. So the game finished, knight to d5, queen to g4, still can't take on c4 because knight to f6 check, knight to e3, bishop takes e6 check, king to h8, queen to g6, I'm just a piece up here, queen to e5, rook to e1, rook to f8, and now I played knight to g5, which is a nice little touch. My opponent resigned here because if he goes h takes, I go queen to h5 mate. If he goes queen takes, then I just simplify, queen takes queen, pawn takes, rook takes knight. A piece up with obviously a winning position. So a very interesting game, not a particularly sound game, and I suppose that's what you've got to be willing to go for when you play the King's Gambit. You've got to try to enter some of these messy, murky positions. I don't think I'll repeat that sacrifice again, but certainly entertaining, and yeah, I mean, I was quite happy with it, even though my opponent missed a win, so probably shouldn't have been happy with it, but the computer only told me about this win now when I've just looked at it. But yeah, good tournament, reasonably happy with my performance there, and I'll try to get some more videos up shortly. Please feel free to leave some of your comments.